I think it's also important to have the freedom to be able to criticize religion as well. Thank you. To talk about their religion.
You need to keep the mic close to you.
To talk about their religion, to convert people, and I think, you know, as an atheist, I should have the same freedom as well. So this is an additional point. Another thing is, I think the comments about the mistake of equating feminism with secularism is not very convincing, because we have totally emancipated professional people who are wearing the burqa and who say, well, they're Muslims, and they talk about Muslim feminists. Well, I don't necessarily agree with them, but we have people like that who say that they're not suppressed, they're not oppressed, they've chosen their Muslim identity freely, they're professionals, they're doctors, they wear, you know, all their Muslim symbols in hospitals and everywhere. So I think we should not generalize, we should be very careful and present proper analysis and research on these things, rather than generalizing and saying that, oh, well, you know, Muslim women are oppressed because, well, they may be in the countries, but not here. I mean, we see people, so we have to have an answer for them. And the third thing that I want to say is, although we say we shouldn't refer to people by their religion, we shouldn't refer to them by their race either, and I've heard several speakers here talking about white feminists, white women, white this, white, well, why are we assuming that all Muslims are non-white or non-Caucasian? I mean, I can see Maryam there, she comes from Iran and she's very white. I come from Turkey and I consider myself white. And real Caucasian people in the Caucasus, they're all white, but you know, there's some extreme Muslim. So we have to be very careful what terminology we use, because then we'll fall into the trap of those who do want to confuse race with religion. So you have to be careful if you're talking about.
Thank you for that.
The most important for me is to send a message to the audience, to the people who are listening and watching. And that message is based on care and about exposing somehow these religious clerics. I mean, indirectly. So I think we need a much more stronger voice, but that voice, and we need to reach media, absolutely, and that voice has to remain kind and not hostile, and we have to attract women. We have to bring women to fight this fight, because there are so many times when I feel let down and I say, what the hell I'm doing? Why am I defending women's rights? And what's to do with me? I'm fine. But the question is, we have to show care and concern for the future. If we don't bring more women to stand and fight their own rights, if we don't expose those scholars gently and directly, and that comes through knowledge of religious law, the depth of this religious law, and try to create a change in the mind of the woman, not only in her heart. So, thank you.
Just a couple of points. I mean, yes, we do have to create solidarity, including with religious groups. If you look at the One Law for All campaign, there's nearly 30,000 signatories, groups and individuals, Muslims, Christians, atheists, what have you. I think that is important because, as I've stressed many times, you know, people who are being called Muslims or immigrants and the far right is attacking them, they're often the first victims and at the front lines of resistance. Let's not forget the front lines of resistance. And so in that sense, I agree. You know, you mentioned the fact that we need engagement. Well, the Islamists don't engage. They just chop your head off. They throw acid in your face, they threaten you, and they intimidate. And therefore, under an Islamic inquisition, engagement and you know, demands for these sorts of things, I think, is at best naive, and at worst helps to keep that political movement going, and we need to fight that political movement. We need to fight it. We need to be clear that we have to fight it. You know, obviously, if you look at the manifesto of the One Law for All campaign, it's not hostile to religion, but I am, and I made that distinction, you know, at the beginning that, you know, as an atheist, I want the de-religionization of society, but I'll take secularism as a minimum. And I think, I think you mentioned very well the Turkish feminists there. I mean, can we please be allowed to be hostile to religion? Thank you very much. I get threatened to death day in and day out for saying, just speaking. So in a time when people are being killed for speaking against religion, it becomes fundamental that we are able to do it. And I think people need to be able to get over it. Get over it. I want to fight Islamism. Islamism's banner is Islam, and I have no choice but to deal with Islam when I'm confronting Islamism. And I think that if we're talking about rights, well, isn't my freedom of expression also a right? Isn't it my right also not to be killed for leaving Islam? Isn't it my right also? And finally, I want to say, yes, religion is a private matter. People have a right to their beliefs. People can think my beliefs are nonsense. They have a right to think that. But the difference is, I don't kill people I disagree with, and the Islamists do. And finally, what I want to say is, opposing religion is not attacking Muslims in the same way that you can put, Jesus Christ in a nappy in Jerry Springer the Opera, and it's not racism against Christians. We need to move away from the debate the framework that the Islamists have given us. And say, no, we can oppose religion, we can be critical of religion, and still defend the rights and dignity of people, including those who consider themselves Muslims. And this goes back to the issue of the burqa. Yes, the burqa I think should be banned, but let's talk about the veil. And I also think child veiling should be banned because it's a form of child abuse. But on the issue of adult woman's headscarf, okay, it's her right, but can I also not criticize it? Why should women be covered up? Because religious dogma says they should? Because they'll create fitna and chaos in society if they're not covered up? I want to be able to criticize it. And in the same way that my criticism of female genital mutilation is not an attack on girls who are mutilated, I should be able to criticize the veil, to criticize religion, and still unequivocally defend people's rights. And I think we need to get used to that.
Nadia, please, yes.
Well, quite short, what I want to say is, for me, the battle is in public space. It's clear that, for instance, when you wear a veil, it's not just for you, but it is to be seen with a lot of meanings. So this is the reason why I think that we have this unique opportunity next year to do something, because the law exists. You just have to ask to the LOCOG, to the IOC, to Europe, to dare to implement their own law and try to remember why they had this law and why, when it is black people, they dare to apply the law. When it is women, they don't dare to do it because of cultural relativism. Because you have nothing to say about the way in which these people are dealing with their women, as if it was a private issue. It's a political issue.
Thanks for that.
I would like to say a word for the British-American lady who intervened to clarify definitions. I think that's very important. You're right. I would tend to agree with you. I'm not here as a feminist. I didn't say I wasn't a feminist. I'm not here as a feminist. I'm here as a secularist. And I think when we're talking secularism, we have to be clear about what that is. And you're right, to me at least. It's not at all directed against believing people, against believers. As Nadia said a few minutes ago, and I don't know if I translated that, but the secularist state tried to guarantee a state free from religious influence. And then it's the believer's problem to see how they come to terms with that. And that would be my definition too. It's up to the believers to come to terms with that state free of religious influence. And of course, secularism absolutely and totally includes the right to criticize religion, because that emanates from other citizens. When we're talking secularism, we're talking about what the state does and does not. And of course, it's not up to the state to criticize one particular religion or more religions. But of course, also, individual citizens are totally and should be totally free, to do that. That's pretty obvious, to me at least.
Thank you.
Yes, just a few words in English about feminism. For me, feminism is equality between men and women, but also to be free to choose, not to be prisoner of his sex. Islamic feminism, for me, like all religious feminism, is based on the idea that men and women are different by nature, by God, and with different rights and duties. And that is not my feminism. My feminism is not a religious feminism, but a secular feminism. Voilà.
Thank you.
Just if I could address the point our friend made over here about the use of the term white feminist, which I used. I used it very explicitly because in the UK, with the male-led left, the only religious fundamentalists that they will defend are those of colour, because of the skewed view that our enemy's enemy is our friend, and also because of the fear, which I would call a hideously cowardly fear, of being called racist. And there lies the problem, because so many people deliberately or ignorantly confuse religion and ethnicity. And so we constantly hear the issue about Muslim women, for example, being racistly attacked because they are wearing the burqa or the veil, when in fact it is a complete skewed view of a chosen religion, and in fact one I would argue no woman can choose freely at all, and racism. And then to our American British friend, I would agree with 90% of what you say. The one thing that I don't agree with is when you say that extremism is always fueled by ignorance and fear. Much religious extremism is fueled by the desire of patriarchs to gain more power and control over women and their children. And it's actually true multiculturalism in the way that liberals speak of it and religious extremists speak of it in this country really is multi-faithism. That's what it is. It's provided the rationale under the disguise of respecting cultural difference for respecting the rights of the patriarch to control fiefdoms in which they have power over women and children. So we mustn't forget that that's the rationale for many religious extremists also.
Thank you. Yes, please, James.
Just one thing. I think in Europe now we have reached a stage where really we cannot be tolerant for the veil, because I mean hijab is part of freedom, but the veil is not part of freedom, because I think it violates our right for security. And I think the European Court have a very a solid something to say to ban it, is that it has nothing to do with religion. It is a sign of extremism in religion. Anything that covers the face. You see, we call it burqa, we call it niqab. It's just when you cover the face. Hijab is when you put a scarf, you know, covering your hair. And that is a part of your freedom. But I think at the moment it should be banned. I agree 100%. And especially because there is nothing in the religion, in the text that says that women has to cover up to this extent. And the other thing is because it violates the rights of other women for security. So in both cases, it should be banned.